true quality built yacht, and they were sought after by many deep water sailors.
If you bought a Vancouver, you were either going to sail around the world or you were going to do something significant with it.
They stand the test of time to that testimony of their quality and durability.
And that's what all these boats typified.
Well, it all started around 1962, early 60s. A friend of mine, his father, who lived around the corner from our house in Sevenoaks. He was an architect, and he also designed boats, and in particular, canoes. My father became interested in this, and he thought about building a canoe just for the family. But being a perfectionist, he wanted to do it differently. I mean, Tarka was like no other canoe at the time, because most canoes in those days were canvas on wooden frames, but he built it in plywood, and it was a work of art.
I very well remember when my father started building the canoes, but the thing that stands out in my mind was how much my father was a perfectionist. The hours that he would spend lavishly putting on the polyurethane varnish on the decks, and they were a work of art. They absolutely shone. And the hulls, which were always polyurethane white, there was if you like, a standard that he worked to, and they really were beautiful.
Over the years, my father built a few canoes, actually. Some he sold, in fact. He was commissioned to build some canoes. People liked them so much. But he built a particular one, which was a sailing canoe. I don't think it was particularly good at sailing, but it was quite a novelty.
This was absolutely nothing like the sort of racing sailing canoes that you see down at Hayling Island Sailing Club. This was effectively the same canoe as the paddle one, but it had a little rudder fitted to it with a Y-shaped tiller, which was, I have to say, an incredibly awkward thing to steer with, because you sat in the canoe and you had it just behind you, a Y-shaped tiller. And when he first produced it, it just had a single sail, a bit of a Polynesian type sail, where it projected in front of the mast, which looked good until you came to tack. And then because of the length of the canoe, it just wouldn't go through the wind. So we had to then redesign that to use a more conventional rig.
My father was actually asked to build a speedboat, and he built that during the winter. And it was first launched on the creek in Hayling Island. And this was the start of a series of boats that he built for other people. He also built a Heron. And then later on, he built, I think I was 10 years old at this time, he built me an 8'6" dinghy, which I learned to sail on. My mother taught me to sail. And that was also at the creek and at Hayling Island. One day, we'd gone out from Hayling Island over to Portsmouth. And I remember he stopped at a house. And then he came out with a big envelope, and I learnt that he had got the plans for a bigger boat. So we thought, well, that's exciting. Dad's going to build a big boat. And this was a 19-foot cabin cruiser, sailing cruiser. It was a twin bilge keel. And he built that in the back garden of our house at Sevenoaks.
I always thought of my parents as being born with salt water in their veins, because they both grew up with fathers who were sailors. On my father's side, my grandfather had a small yacht, and on my mother's side, well, she used to go racing down at Hayling Island Sailing Club with the dinghy that my grandfather owned. During the war, they both served in the Royal Navy. My father as a lieutenant on board convoy ships, and my mother was a Wren officer working first in Portsmouth and then during D-Day down at Southampton, of course, where the Vancouvers were first born.
father was looking through lots of dictionaries, trying to find suitable names, and a lot of things were sort of mentioned and chucked away. And one day we were driving somewhere, and he suddenly said, I've got the name Pheon. He said, I rather like that. And it's a heraldic sign for a barbed arrowhead. And he said, I like the sound of it. So basically that's where the name Pheon came from. That year, when Pheon was completed, we took all the boats down to Hayling Island. Now, you can imagine, we had Pheon, and a special trailer had been built for Pheon. We had a canoe, and that sat on the roof of my father's car, which was pulling Pheon. And then my mother, we had a Morris Minor, she had my little 8'6" dinghy called Minnie on the roof of that. So it was a bit of a convoy with 3 boats. Inside Pheon, we had a drum kit, an amplifier and a guitar, because my brother Brian and I were both into music and we played music, and my grandparents used to like to hear us play. So we had all that. And then we had the dog Tiny, who was a big black dog, and he was with us. So it was quite a convoy, and it was not an easy journey down to Hayling Island, but it was fun. Pheon was the last boat my father built for quite some time. We moved down to Friston to start with. I was the one who continued boating. Being at school, I joined the school sailing club, and friends of mine had their own boats, and I wanted my own boat. So I bought an Enterprise which my father restored, and I sailed that from Seaford here in the Newhaven Seaford Sailing Club. Life was actually pretty tough for my father at that point. The business in London, they sold it, and he started a business over in Brighton, or he bought one, but he didn't like it very much. He then did a succession of jobs for other people. I was at college by that time, and not really understanding the tough time that he was having. And it came to a head at one point where a company he was working for went bankrupt, and he was unemployed. And it was my mother who said to him one day, well, look, you built boats before, why don't you build boats now? And that's where it all started. Well, after my mother had suggested boat building, he had to find a location, and there was a piece of ground available in a quarry at South Heighton near Newhaven. We went and demolished a scout hut on the side of the hill, and those materials were used to build a huge shed on this waste ground in South Heighton. And that was built big enough to build a 38-foot yacht. My father had a close friend in Newhaven who was also a yacht broker, and it was him that set him on the path. He was an agent for Hurley Yachts, and he had a brokerage in Newhaven.
John Dandridge I first met approximately in 1973. He had a small vessel in the marina where I worked, in Newhaven Marina, and that was called Pheon. And it was a vessel that he built himself, a little 21, 22-foot bilge keeler. I can remember it vividly because it was so immaculately kept and maintained. I suppose it was about a year or so later that he indicated to me that he was interested to build a boat, and to maybe even build several boats. And I think it was 1974 when he decided he wanted to actually venture into this and build a boat and just prove to himself that he could do it. He then bought from me a Hurley 24 set of mouldings for him to complete himself. And it was kind of that vessel that cut his teeth on building a boat.
So that's basically how it started. The first boat was a Hurley 2470, which was a small boat. And the idea was that he would fit out custom-built Hurley 2470s. And the first one came as a hull and deck. And he started fitting that out in the big shed at South Highton.
John was a great friend of my father's. He was a gentleman. He was not demonstrative. He was not overbearing, but he was considered quiet, trustworthy, a man that you would be quite happy to talk to for any length of time about any subject. And he would give you a considered answer in a very intelligent way.
Once the Hurley 2470 was handed over to the new owners, my father was going to start a Hurley Tailwind, but it was a bit of a disaster at the time. The company, Hurley, went bankrupt. And so no more hulls and decks were going to come out of that company. It rather left my father in the lurch, and he had to find a new boat to build.
What followed that particular vessel was obviously the purchase of the design from Robert Harris of the Vancouver 27.
One day he got a copy of Yachting World and was looking through it and saw a little silhouette drawing of a yacht. And it really struck him. He looked at it and thought, now that looks the sort of boat I'd like to own. It was a brand new design by a naval architect in Vancouver called Robert B. Harris. And the article was about a yacht that was being designed as a one-off for a couple to sail across the Pacific from Seattle to New Zealand. My father was very excited about this, and he contacted Bob Harris immediately and asked if he could build the boat. And Bob Harris came back and said, yes, absolutely. You can have the European rights for the wooden boat. So immediately, having procured the plans from Bob, made a start on building the first European Vancouver 27.
So in 1973, purchase tax was replaced by VAT. And the government at the time, a Conservative government under Edward Heath, actually increased luxury tax. They had 3 rates of tax at the time. And the highest rate was 25%, which was applied to yachts for private use because they were considered a luxury item. So that immediately had a significant effect on selling anything yacht. And there was a considerable depression at the time, which slowed up the construction of boats, and the market was gone for a while. So John was taking a considerable risk in starting a business in what was an industry in turmoil at the time. But he did so, and he did so with great credit, because he started from scratch and built his boats in not the ideal of situations until, of course, eventually the Pheon factory was built and he could build them more easily.
My father employed a friend of ours, Arthur Jackman, and he worked with him on making the hull. And once the hull was made, it had to be rotated into an upright position. And that was a pretty precarious business because the whole hull had to be suspended from beams overhead and then lifted off the ground and then slowly rotated until it was in an upright position and mounted in a cradle, which had to be built around it. So you can imagine, it was pretty heavy and very dicey. I was at college in Brighton at the time, and I used to call in and see how progress was going. I got home one day and found him in a chair with his arm in a sling. And I looked at him and he looked terrible. And I said, what on earth has happened? He was cutting a piece of wood with a skill saw, and unfortunately his thumb got in the way and it took the top of his thumb off, which was pretty disastrous at the time. We all wondered how on earth he was going to complete the boat. And there was no alternative but actually to start employing. The first European Vancouver 27 was built for a German owner called Oscar Klerks. It was launched at Newhaven in the summer of 1975.
The first Vancouver 27 that was called Strider was a Newhaven, and the new owner was there. And my mother asked me, or told me first of all, that they were going to take the boat out to do some publicity photos, and asked if I'd like to go out and take some cinefilm, which I was very happy to do.
We were present at the launching of the first boat, Strider, at Newhaven, and we saw her sailing around Seaford Bay and doing evaluation trials and so on.
Strider actually is still going to this day. She is up on the east coast. The owner is an elderly gentleman. The boat's no longer called Strider, it's called Burnaby. And he's just done a major restoration job on the boat. So all credit to him. He's kept this boat going all these years, and it's in great shape.
I bought Burnaby about 10 years ago. Burnaby was in the local marina at Tollesbury. She'd been laid up for a couple of years and was in a rather tatty state. So I thought, well, this is something I could do to clean her up and tidy her up and possibly even sail her single-handed. She was delightful to sail. Burnaby was the first Vancouver to be built in the UK. She was built in wood. All the subsequent boats were fiberglass.
Many people think that the first boat, Strider, the wooden boat, was used as the plug for the subsequent fiberglass boats. In actual fact, it wasn't. Whilst Strider was being completed, work was started on building a plug for the fiberglass boat. My first job during holiday time, Easter holidays in fact it was to set up all the frames for the plug. The plug was going to be built to the same design as the wooden boat. The wooden boat was launched before the plug was complete, and it was found that the boat was a little bit tender. It would roll very easily. It was very much of a wine glass shape. And when this was mentioned to Bob Harris, who had come over to see the boat when it was launched, he said, look, we can stiffen this up by fattening the boat out by 3 inches either side of the waterline. And with copious quantities of car body filler, the plug was altered to fatten out the hull at the waterline level, and that's what gives it this fantastic shape. When you look at the Vancouver 27 from the stern, it's got a really attractive water-hugging look about it due to the extra 6 inches of beam at the waterline.
Fiberglass in itself really only became a product used for series production in the early 70s, so everything fiberglass was still being learnt about. The method of laying up and the resins that were available then were quite agricultural. They weren't like they are now, where everything is scientifically analysed and used to best effect. In those days, it was put as much gel coat and resin on the mould as you can to make it thick and strong. But of course nowadays they don't do that.
The first fiberglass Vancouver 27 was called Sunrise, and that was bought by Christian Lambertson. Sunrise was completed in June 1976. The order book was growing dramatically. It became very clear that there was no way we could continue construction of Vancouvers in a single shed. It just was not practical. Cantell's shipyard in Newhaven had huge sheds, and we had a look and see if we could use those sheds. We contacted the guy who ran that boatyard, and he said yes, we can have the slipway and the sheds to build Vancouvers. So we then built a factory, inverted commas, which was basically a sort of roof made out of sheets of plastic and some big plywood doors on the front. The plastic sheeting was to keep all the bird droppings off. But we had 3 bays in which to build yachts. It was all very Heath Robinson. We had one owner, a tall Dutchman. He came in one day and he looked around at this ramshackle shed, and he said, out of this horrendous shed comes these beautiful yachts. With 3 bays in the factory, production really stepped up a gear.
I think the job was advertised at the job centre, I think.
My mother phoned John Dandridge and asked if he would take me on. I couldn't read or write, didn't know what I was going to do, and I joined Pheon Yachts at the age of 15, and it went from there. And I did everything I was asked to do. It gave me work ethic, it gave me sense of worth, it gave me a lot that I didn't have from school, and I owe a lot to the Dandridges.
As I went down there, I saw all the lads there, and I sort of wandered about a bit and had a look about, and they could see that I was coming for a job because I didn't know where the office was, and they were basically shouting at me, "Oh, tell them you make models, tell them you do airfix models." So as I walked up the stairs, I thought, well, I do actually, but and then during the interview with John, he just said, "Oh, well, what do you like to do and everything?" Because this was one of my first jobs. I was only 17 at the time. And I said, "Oh, a bit of model making," and basically, yeah, I got the job. It's brilliant.
So I joined Pheon Yachts by mistake. I was working in the City of London, and I left that job and came down and was living in Lewis. And one day I cycled down to Newhaven and went down to the harbour, looked round the boats, and I happened to pass Pheon Yachts on my way.
And then I had to build my own toolbox. That was my first week's work. Now, Pheon Yachts, to build my own toolbox, to fit everything in, the box, the sharpening stone, the whole lot, you know, pegs for the saws and all that. And then after that, I think I spent 2 weeks sweeping around Charlie Francis's bench. Would let me touch a bit of wood. And yeah, just keeping him supplied with tea and sweeping around his bench until such times they let me loose on a boat.
And somebody down in the marina told me all about the Vancouver Yachts and what brilliant boats they were. So I thought, oh well, I'll just pop in to the yard and just ask a few questions. And I happened to see Andrew and John Dandridge, plus everybody who was building the yachts at the time. And cut a long story short, I ended up selling the boats rather than anything else, and giving the odd hand down in the construction area as well.
The job centre provided me with this advert for this boat building firm in Newhaven, Pheon Yachts, and we came down, had a look. They seemed to like me, so they took me on. And that was only half an hour from home rather than several hours. It was ideal, really.
First day for me was they said, "Oh, you're doing headlining in a boat." I went, "Oh, what's that? I don't know. I just do joinery." They said, "Well, yeah, you'll be doing joinery, but today you'll do a headlining with Paul and another guy. I can't remember his name."
When I joined Pheon, I was 18, I suppose, 1982, something like that. And I was based back at home with my parents in Lindfield, so it was a bit of a dash down in the morning to get there on time. But as long as the cows weren't crossing the road, we got there.
It was all about teamwork. We do the decks, guys would do inside. We'd have banter through the window. We'd have banter all over the place, and I absolutely enjoyed it. The scaffolding, health and safety, don't know about that. Held together with nuts and bolts and G-cramps, but it was fun, and that's what I enjoy. And I took that through my whole life, working team. It's just having a bit of fun at work. Some days it got a bit serious, some days it didn't.
I'd been made redundant from a furniture company, joinery, and so I was really looking forward to working with all the different woods, but it was only teak, wasn't it?
Yeah, everything was
Nothing
teak.
else.
Anything asked, I'd do. Always said yes. That's what my dad said to do, and that's what I did.
Generally, the whole crew and team at Pheon Yachts while I was there all worked really well. They all had their designated tasks to do what they were doing, and it all fed into the final product coming together at the end of the day.
My responsibilities were started off as joiner, so I suppose you call an assistant joiner. You had one of the experienced lads in the boat with us, and I learnt off them. And then eventually, when John and everybody thought I was good enough, they gave me my own boat to do the inside of, and put me up to senior joiner, whatever that accounted for. But I was in there doing the teak work and the fitting and the second fix, I suppose you call it, of all the joinery.
I'd not worked on boats before properly, and so working with curves all the time is quite something to get round, isn't it? And they're graduated curves as well, so.
I got taught how to paint polyurethane with a mirror shine. John Dandridge used to come out and say, no, you can't do it like that. Rub it down, start again. So you'd have to rub it all down and start again. 2-part polyurethane, goes off fast. So you can't stand there and chat. And he taught me to put on it like glass, and you'd feather it all out, and that's still how I paint today. Used to do the anti-fouling. Yeah, smell was pretty cool. Rub it all down, dust yourself up, then primer it, anti-foul it. Interesting job. The boats used to go out, proud to send them out looking like they were.
The lads are good fun to be with, and it was a decently set up yard. It was pretty clean, which was quite nice for a boatyard. And yeah, it was just an enjoyable time. We had a decent product to build, and I think we built it quite well. Certainly seems to have a reputation for doing it, but so it's nice to have the memory of working on a decent product, which is, yeah, it's always nice to always have a bit of pride in the job.
Rigging, I used to do the painting down the side of the boat. I did all the teak decks.
The worst part of that job was grinding off the fiberglass in the first place.
Yeah,
because you had to
get
rough
it
it
dead
all up.
flat, yeah.
We laid the decks, we had to grind it all off. Monkey's job. No masks, fiberglass everywhere. Used to grind all that down, and then we used to lay all the outside first, and then we used to work in. We used to go around the outside, then we used to build inwards, and then we used to cut the king plank as we went. And it was all measurements, which is good because I don't do measurements. And it was a learning curve.
You'd have a white paper suit on, huge, great big, 80 grit belt sander on.
Yeah.
And you'd go running, and they'd have staging down the other side of the decks, which wasn't the best staging. It wasn't like scaffolding. It was like bits of timber cobbled together, like a pallet here and there, cut up and bolted so you could walk around the side of the boat while you're doing this. The amount of times I've missed and gone through with the belt sander going off the deck and me hanging down the side,
We had a film crew in one day, and as they were filming, Mr. Dandridge and the family at the front, and Charlie Lower and myself were moving staging in the background so we could get in shot. So it was just fun to get in the shot, work out how we were going to get in the shot, and nobody ever knew.
On the eve of the Brighton Boat Show, there are signs at long last that Britain's yacht-building industry may be coming out of recession. One firm, Pheon Yachts of Newhaven, have doubled their workforce since last year and now have full order books. Derek Williamson reports.
Another Vancouver 27 is launched at Newhaven Marina, the 91st since John and Peggy Dandridge floated their company, Pheon Yachts, 9 years ago. Their range now includes the 32-foot Pilot, which will be shown to the public for the first time at the Brighton Boat Show. They're aimed unashamedly at the luxury end of the market, with a reputation for ocean-going seaworthiness rather than offshore cruiser racing. Paradoxically, it's a specialisation which has enabled them to survive even the darkest days of the recession.
I think we can look forward to much better prospects in the coming months and the coming years. I think the whole country is gradually coming out of recession, and we've certainly noticed a marked difference in the last 6 months.
Who buys or who can afford to spend £25,000 to £45,000 on a yacht these days?
Well, that's the extraordinary thing, you know. Most of our owners have paid cash for their boats. The money is about. I think it's purely a question of general confidence in the future, and people will be prepared to spend their money on something like a Vancouver.
Now, with orders picking up, they're turning out 25 boats a year from their yard on Denton Creek. And the workforce of 15 fitters, shipwrights and cabinet makers has doubled in the last year. The Vancouver range is priced between £25,000 and £45,000, which means a turnover this year of around £500,000 for the Dandridge family business.
Pheon Yachts initially cut their teeth on the Vancouver 27, and I think that perhaps was their iconic design. It aimed itself at people who wanted to sail shorthanded long distances.
We've been building the Vancouver 27 for some time when Bob Harris announced a new Vancouver. It was the Vancouver 32. And he asked my parents if they wanted to build it. He was anxious that we should build it in this country. I was given a free hand to design all the inside of the boat. So I set to and prepared all the drawings. And then when the boat was in that bay, I went inside the boat, marked it all out, all according to my drawings within the hull. And Jim Arnott, who was our chief chippy at the time, went in and started construction of the 32.
I joined Pheon Yachts in 1982 with Mr. John Dandridge and his wife Peggy, who were at the time taking quite a lot of orders for the Vancouver 27 and some Vancouver 32s. And so the order book was quite buoyant, and I think there was a need to obviously process the work as soon as possible. So that's when I joined the company.
The 32, which I still have, is a lovely boat with a nice big cockpit, but it's tiller steered. I like that because once you've folded the tiller up, you've got bags of room to sit around in it.
The normal standard Vancouver 32 is the classic coach roof design.
I knew John Dandridge, who was producing Vancouver boats. Michael Welsh and myself were asked if we could do the plug for the Vancouver 32. Most of the components for the plug were actually produced in this workshop on the machines that you see around here. We used Aerex foam, and once all the foam was screwed to the framework, then it was fiberglassed over the top of the Aerex foam. We employed friends and various other people with long sanding boards for a number of months before we could get the surface completely satisfied to take a mould of it. Once that was done, then we hired a compressor to spray the 2-pat polyurethane on top of the finished plug. But this all takes months and months. I think in all we were about a year on the whole project. Michael Welsh and myself built the plug, and the plug was going to become a foam sandwich boat. North Shore fiberglassed the inside of this hull, which was the plug for the mould. So once that was fiberglassed, Pheon Yachts in Newhaven finished that hull. It was transported to them and they finished the complete hull. And that became the only Vancouver 32 to be produced as a foam sandwich hull.
Peggy Dandridge was always in the office looking after all the paperwork.
Peggy Dandridge always made me smile because whenever the wages were wrong, it was always the computer's fault. And a computer only works what you put into it. So it used to make me chuckle that the computer was wrong, and that's why our wages were wrong. So, yeah, it used to make me smile, and a huge amount of respect for them, both of them. Huge amount.
She was a really lovely lady.
She's the one who worked out our wages, so she's very important.
I did know Peggy Dandridge, but not very well. My memories of her when I used to go to Pheon Yachts at Newhaven is that she was definitely in charge, from my opinion, and but we got on fine. I think John had to do as he's told sometimes, but that's only my personal opinion. Am I right?
Yeah. Oh dear. Right, okay.
Part of the selling process for the Vancouvers was to take part in boat shows.
The target for building the Vancouver 32 was the 1980 London Boat Show at Earl's Court. We built the hull, first of all, and we started fitting out the interior. The deck mould was produced from a plug that was built in South Heighton. When that was ready, that was shipped down to North Shore, down in Itchener, ready to have a mould taken off it. North Shore made the mould, but Brian Moffat, who was the owner of North Shore, rang up one day and said, "I'm sorry, but we've got a big problem. The deck plug has stuck inside the mould, and I'm afraid it's going to be a total loss." Now this was horrendous, as you can imagine. However, my father was determined this was not going to be a problem. And we said, look, we'll go down to North Shore and we will remove the plug from the inside of the mould. And that's exactly what we did. We drove down there for 3 weeks, every day, a team of guys, myself included, and my father. The whole thing was flipped over so we could get at the underside, and we ripped the plug out of the mould bit by bit. First of all the bulkheads, and then all the plywood. We delaminated it bit by bit with chisels, and then when we got down to the paint layers, we dissolved those out with solvents until we got down to the gel coat, and we cleaned the whole thing up, and we got the job done. The problem with the deck mould set us back quite a few weeks, and we had this deadline for the London Boat Show at Earl's Court in January. In order to do that, we introduced a 24-hour working program. They worked night and day to help us get this boat built. And we had a night team go in when the factory closed in the evening, and they worked like Trojans to complete the inside of the boat. My wife Valerie and I even worked on it at weekends. We put the linings in one day just to keep the impetus going. We had guys working inside the boat on the lorry as it went into Earl's Court to finish it off. It was that close. It was extraordinary. The boat was a rip-roaring success. It had so many good comments. People would come on board the boat and look around. They were amazed.
Eventually, they produced the first pilot version of the 32.
We were exhibiting a Vancouver 27 at the Southampton Boat Show, and I came across a boat I'd not seen before, it was called the Seastream 34. And it was quite different from everything else. And it had a flush deck with a pilot house. I was intrigued. I thought, I'm going to have a look at this. So I stepped aboard and had a look inside. And what struck me was the ability to look around from inside the boat. Driving home from the Southampton Boat Show, I thought about this and I thought, there may be a market for this from our point of view. And can I adapt our Vancouver 32 accordingly? By the time I got home, I'd pretty much designed the whole thing in my head, and I sat down and drew it all up and showed it to my parents. And we put the design to Bob Harris, who was very complimentary. We had a few little comments about it. And then we thought, right, let's see if we can get this done. The first pilot with a wooden coach roof was called Hoodwink. And the reason for the name was that the owner, the guy who ordered the boat, he always thinks he hoodwinked his bank manager into paying for it. So he was quite a character.
Hoodwink was a 32-foot pilot version, so they cut the top off, which was pretty dusty. Then they built it up. The pilot house was all built in wood.
We weren't going to make a mould for it. We decided to do it with a wooden pilot house, which was basically an adaptation. We had a 32 hull and deck without the upper section of the coach roof, and we built it from that.
Standard deck, different layout, interesting to do. Was a bit of a challenge, but we managed it. There was no time limit as such, but there was. And we just had to make the templates, cut all the teak, stick the teak deck down, do all the capron rails.
Myself and another guy called Jack, who was very involved with structuring the new pilot house area of the boat as the boat was being fitted out. And she looked amazing. At the end of the day, she looked a beautiful boat.
I met the owner in a different job. He absolutely loved the workmanship that had gone into it, and it's still in Newhaven, up on dry dock.
From our point of view, the size range of the Vancouvers was, we had the 27, the 32, the 32 Pilot, then we had the Vancouver 38.
The Vancouver 38 first came into the picture as a real innovation and something which was enormously exciting to be involved with.
The Vancouver 38 was quite a boat. It's a very expensive business tooling up for a boat of that size, so we decided to go for a different approach. She was built in steel, and there was a company up in the Midlands who built round-bilged steel boats.
The hull arrived, this huge steel hull, and it was a matter of putting the whole thing together. So Andrew and the rest of the team had a lot of innovation to undertake.
Bob Harris, we commissioned to design the hull and the deck. We designed a fiberglass top to the coach roof.
The Vancouver 38, what an amazing bit of kit that was. Steel built. I used to do the teak decks, but I had no idea how to do a teak deck on a steel boat. So it was work it out and go as we went.
That was just like a cathedral inside, and myself and Trevor White went in and came out 6 months later with a complete boat. It was, quite a project, that one, but it was a nice one to do.
I used to be able to cork up a full 27 deck in about 3 hours, with me on my own. The 38 was a different class. We weren't fully trained carpenters, but we had 3 of us on it, and we did it. So when you looked from the mast down, the king plank looked straight through. Although there's a 2-inch drop at one end, it just looked like it continued. One of my proudest moments.
We had to punch a hole in the wall in the factory to get the whole boat in, because she was big, but she was a fantastic boat.
The Then came the interesting job of how do we actually put it in the water. This very large crane arrived and I stood aghast, wondering what on earth they were going to do.
It was a beautiful boat, and it was one particular weekend that we all went out for a family sail on it. And I remember particularly because we had my young son. I've got a photograph somewhere which shows him sitting on my lap behind the wheel of 38. And as I say, I think it was a particularly beautiful yacht.
I remember taking it out on a trial sail out of Newhaven, and which was an exciting thing to do. It sailed extremely well. We were delighted, he was delighted, and John was pleased.
Pheon at the time were thinking about having a new mould made for the 27 because it was getting a bit old and worn. And talking to Andrew Dandridge, John's son, who was very much involved in the design work at Pheon Yachts, we evolved the boat a foot longer, and that was mainly to get the water running off the side decks from slopping into the back of the cockpit, which it did in the 27. It was also a great time to build an interior mould, which cut down build time and cost. At the same time, it would give us more headroom inside the boat. All plus points, but basically the same boat as the 27. And I bought the first one of those, Islander, although mine was the only 28 built by Pheon.
I was standing on the bank of the river there with my father, and I just remember how he looked around. He said, with great pride, you know, we built all this in the last 10 years. And he really was immensely proud of what he'd achieved with Pheon Yachts. And that's always stuck in my mind.
Having built the first pilot with a wooden coach roof, or wooden pilot house, should I say, we then decided we would go down the path of a fiberglass pilot house. The problem was it nearly broke the company. The tooling that we did to produce the pilot house was very expensive, and the boat industry was going through a very tough time at that point. As I say, it nearly broke the company, and we needed financing.
We couldn't order what we would normally order. It was, you can't do that, you have to order one box of screws. So you knew something wasn't right, but no, I never knew that there was a cash flow problem. I was devastated when I lost my job. Absolutely devastated, because I was there for life.
A nice place to work. I was so gutted when that.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, it was quite a sad time to, because it was a shock. I'd only been there about, a year. And I was learning so much and getting to know work colleagues. It's like something you feel you're going to be doing for years.
But it set me up for life. It set me up for my next job I had, working with boats, and I owe lots of Pheon Yachts.
We sought around for a person to come into the company and refinance the boat and basically buy the company out. And that was in the form of a enthusiastic Vancouver 27 owner, Kevin Seymour. He bought the company from my parents, and he took it over. But unfortunately, things were not great within the industry at the time. Orders were tough, and there were problems, and in effect, the company went into receivership in April 1986 and was bought up by North Shore. So all production went to North Shore from that point onwards.
And they took all the boats and the building materials and so on down to their own yard in Itchenor. and continued to build Vancouvers there for a number of years, but they built them well.
I've invested some money in Pheon Yachts because I enjoyed working with Andrew and John and all the people there. And North Shore at the time was moulding all the hulls and expanding basically by buying in other brands. And we talked with Brian Moffat, who owned North Shore Yachts, and it made a lot of sense, instead of just moulding the hulls at North Shore, for the boats to be built at North Shore and become part of North Shore.
Seem to remember a 34 at one stage, which was built at Itchener.
More and more people were asking for wheel steering. And although Pheon had put wheel steering on the prototype 32 Pilot, it was a bit too squashed up really in looks. And by adding just a couple of feet onto the length of the hull mould, just literally splicing it on, you had then had all the space you needed for a wheel and, 4 or 5 people in the cockpit. So it was an obvious development, and I think it's a very pretty boat.
I stayed on with a chap called Nick Darby, who was working with us at the time, and we looked after the factory until everything was shipped down to North Shore. And then Brian Moffat asked me if I would go to North Shore, work part-time down there. I ended up designing all their office blocks, all their office buildings, and other buildings as well. I had very little to do with the boat construction down there. I had already set up my own design business elsewhere, and after about a year I left and carried on my own business.
I managed to persuade them to have a go and build a Pilot on the 34, which again, with the extra length, just looked better. North Shore was a great choice really for Vancouvers to move here. They built, hand-built, beautiful yachts, and when I first met Brian Moffat, the chairman and owner of North Shore Yachts, we got on very well. He knew exactly what he was doing and where he was going, and I think we all felt confident that he would make a super job of the Vancouvers.
I'm Tom Darcy, and between May 2016 and August 2020, I sailed Fathom single-handed around the world via the Panama Canal and the Cape of Good Hope. Fathom is a Vancouver 28, built in 1991 at North Shore, and I became the third owner in summer 2013. For over 33,000 nautical miles, over 4 years, and even including a coronavirus lockdown, she was both my home and my only means of transport. Fathom proved to be a strong and safe boat, and despite the normal wear and tear on gear associated with long ocean passages, she never let me down. She also had a decent turn of speed. When sailing wing on wing in the trade winds, with a poled out head sail and reefed mainsail, she would regularly do in excess of 120 nautical miles a day, which is pretty good for a heavy 8.5 metre long keel boat packed with stores. I often surprised much bigger boats when I turned up in port not far behind them, or sometimes even ahead.
Hello, we're Graham and Diane Keating. We're on Morny of Ardwell, our Vancouver 38 Pilot. She was built in 1997, and she's just a fantastic seaboat.
Well, actually, this is our second Vancouver. We had our first one from 2006, and we had Gen 2 of Ardwell and we took her to sail round Britain in 6 weeks and absolutely loved her. But we had the chance to spot a slightly bigger Vancouver 38 pilot, and that little bit of extra size really topped it.
The pilot house is something we really enjoyed, and we would probably struggle to go back to a non-pilot house boat. Not only in a lovely anchorage, you can sit there and look out the windows and enjoy it, but in poor weather, it just gives you fantastic shelter. And we had a pretty wild and a rainy trip up a couple of years ago up the Irish Sea, sailing up from Penzance to Peel on the Isle of Man. And the design really proved its worth.